One of the most iconic photographs during World War II is raising the flag on Iwo Jima. The credit goes to AP journalist Joe Rosenthal, who captured the moment on February 23, 1945. The war was entering its final phase. 6 U.S. Marines raised an American flag atop Mount Suribachi, the highest point on Japan's Iwo Jima. Barely 21 square kilometers, this volcanic island witnessed 36 days of battle between Japan and the United States. Nearly 7,000 American troops lost their lives in the fight against Japanese soldiers. It was one of the bloodiest battles in the history of U.S. Marine Corps. Their sacrifice is still remembered today.
With Woody's passing, we have lost a deeply selfless American and a vital link to our nation's greatest generation. His story echoes the service of so many Americans who faced the horrors of war so that liberty might triumph over fascism.
While she was Speaker of the House, Pelosi honored a U.S. veteran who fought and lost his life at Iwo Jima. But not everyone shares her sentiment.
Over 80,000 Marines, soldiers, and sailors from our two countries fought at Iwo Jima. More than 26,000 died here. Today, we revere their courage.
At a memorial service on Iwo Jima in March this year, Hegseth honored the sacrifice as a joint tribute with Japan. A clear shift in the U.S. stance. Critics said his words are rewriting history and dulling the hard truth of a war fought against fascism. His Twitter comments didn't go down well either. He said, "Their courage secured freedom. We honor them, we remember them, and we will never forget them." Netizens said he minimized the sacrifice of U.S. soldiers by remembering the Japanese fighters.
We owe the Japanese no apology. Pete Hegseth, speaking at the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Iwo Jima honour ceremony, has no honour. He is an incompetent Secretary of Defence. He should be fired.
Hegseth's remarks revealed historical ignorance of some U.S. officials and reflect a misguided effort by certain Americans to pursue historical revisionism driven by geopolitical self-interest. Currently, to maintain its hegemony in the Asia-Pacific, the United States regards Japan as a strategic pivot and deliberately downplays criticism of Japan's militaristic history. They blur the boundary between justice and injustice. It even blurs the nature of the war through forms such as joint commemorations, attempting to serve its geopolitical goals by emphasizing and promoting the historical narrative of the US and Japan turning enemies into friends.
The truth was further blurred when the U.S. Department of State removed some web pages about Ira Hayes. He was a Native American veteran, one of the 6 men who raised the flag on Iwo Jima. U.S. media reports criticized the move. The Washington Post said it reflected how military leaders are aggressively pursuing U.S. President Donald Trump's mandate against diversity, equality, and inclusion. So how did Japan and the U.S. get here? From conflict to reconciliation, what does the Iwo Jima battle mean for World War II? Let's go back to where it all began. Iwo Jima, located 1,200 kilometers south of Tokyo, sits almost midway between Tokyo and the Marianas, which was controlled by the U.S. in the summer of 1944. Iwo Jima held strategic significance for Japan and the U.S. For Japan, it was a vital warning station to detect U.S. bombers en route to its mainland. For the U.S., it was an ideal emergency landing site for its air forces. It wanted a clear path for its B-29 bombers to attack Japan's main island. It also wanted to eliminate the Japanese airfields on Iwo Jima, which allowed Japanese air forces to harass the Marianas. But capturing it was not an easy task. The dormant Mount Suribachi erupted. thick layers of ash blanketed Iwo Jima. The ash and black sand created sharp-sloped beaches, which made it difficult for U.S. troops to climb.
It was ankle deep, you know. You couldn't run. You had to just plunge along. You claw a lot with something like that.
That was the most porous sand I've ever mired up in, and you'd go up a step and you'd fall back too.
General Tadamichi Kuribayashi was the commander on Iwo Jima. He told his troops to hold the island for 60 days. He tried to buy time to defend the homeland. He put in place a different strategy this time. He wanted to turn the island into a deadly fortress. His men began to build maze-like complex of tunnels, bunkers, storehouses, pillboxes, and caves. He also issued a special order to his soldiers. Each man had to kill 10 enemies before dying. What do you think of this strategy compared to previous ones? Was it formidable enough to make an impact?
The defense strategy of building underground fortifications was essentially a desperate last-ditch measure by Japan to resist defeat and prolong the war. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi was well aware that the Japanese army was largely outmatched by the US military in both manpower and equipment. Therefore, he abandoned the traditional beachhead defense model. His tactical corps focused on avoiding direct confrontation and instead relied on tunnel warfare for guerrilla-style ambushes and sniper attacks, aiming to prolong the battle and make US troops pay in blood for every step forward. This tactic indeed resulted in some of the heaviest casualties to the US military in the Pacific theater.
After 4 days of intense fighting, Mount Suribachi finally fell on February 23, 1945. The stars and stripes flew on the mountain top, a symbol of American perseverance. But fighting continued for over 30 days until March 26, 1945.
They appeared as small dots far out to sea. The dots became larger and more distinct as they drew close. I thought it was incredible. How can they have so many ships? The shells were hitting about 3 or 4 kilometers away from me and raised so much dirt, dust, and smoke that I couldn't see Mount Suribachi. It was death and chaos.
Heavy casualties for both sides. The US, a major Allied force, and Japan, a main Axis power. 36 days of fighting saw the death of 6,821 US Marines, soldiers, and sailors. Nearly 20,000 Americans were injured. About 23,000 Japanese troops died, accounting for over 90% of the total stationed on the island. September 2, 1945. 6 months later, Japan formally surrendered. This marked the end of World War II. For millions of people, it was a day of relief, remembrance, and the promise of peace. But in recent years, there has been a rise in right-wing nationalism in Japan. For instance, this is a Japanese school textbook. It has been revised to downplay Japan's wartime aggression and reframe history from a more nationalistic perspective. And let's not forget the persistent visits by Japanese political officials to Yasukuni Shrine. This is where 14 Class A war criminals are enshrined. These visits have led to rising tensions between Japan and neighboring countries. Is ignorance the solution here? Is it better to confront the truth, even if it's painful or difficult to accept?
The actions of some US officials effectively echo the Japanese right-wing's effort to cover up history and glorify war crimes, and are essentially a betrayal of the achievements of the anti-fascist victory in World War II. Japan, taking advantage of US tolerance, evades historical responsibility and seeks legitimacy for its military expansion. It must be emphasized that the reason Japan's erroneous views of World War II and revisionist actions have prevailed is largely due to significant US responsibility. After the war, driven by Cold War needs, the US did not thoroughly root out Japanese militarism but hastened to support conservative Japanese parties to govern, turning Japan into the Cold War's Far East frontline base. This is the root cause of Japan's long-standing historical problems. The sacrifice of US soldiers in the Battle of Iwo Jima was to crush fascist aggression, while the Japanese resistance was to uphold militaristic expansion. The two cannot be morally equated. Such statements cause renewed harm to the millions of people from countries victimized during World War II. History has long proven that tolerating aggression's legacy inevitably leads to the repetition of war tragedies. The actions by the US and Japan represent a regression in history and a betrayal of humanity's shared memory.
Today, Iwo Jima stands not only as a place of historical significance, but as a warning and a testament to the price of war. A message echoes across generations. The human cost of conflict is devastating and long-lasting. Peace should be cherished and protected.